What happens when survival becomes both a blessing and a curse? Linda has fought her way back from the edge of death, but while her body heals, her heart carries wounds far deeper than scars. The cruelest truth is that she can never become a mother again, a secret that torments her every day as she waits for Quang, the man she loves, to return. Will his love withstand this truth, or will it shatter beneath the weight of broken dreams? Subscribe to our channel and follow this heartbreaking yet powerful journey of love, fear, and fragile hope. Linda's recovery was not a sudden miracle but rather a slow and fragile process, one that demanded both patience and endurance. Her body, once so frail and weakened after the ordeal, had gradually begun to regain its strength. The doctors had called it a victory, her family whispered it was a blessing, and to the outside world she looked like a survivor, a woman who had fought a fierce battle and returned. Yet behind her quiet smile lingered shadows that no medicine could cure. Every scar on her skin was only a faint reminder of the deeper wound carved into her soul, a wound that throbbed silently each time she remembered the loneliest moment of her life. It was during the hours when she fought against death itself that she had realized how alone she truly was. The hospital room had been filled with the sterile scent of antiseptic, the hurried footsteps of nurses, the clipped voices of doctors urging one another to act quickly. Linda remembered clutching the bed sheets with trembling hands, her vision fading in and out, as though she were teetering at the edge of two worlds. Pain pulsed through her body, relentless and merciless, until she thought she might shatter under its weight. And through it all, there was one thought that pierced more sharply than the physical agony. Quang is not here. She had whispered his name in desperation, her voice barely audible under the oxygen mask. But the man she longed for did not appear. No hand reached for hers. No familiar voice bent close to tell her she would be all right. That absence tore through her more brutally than any incision, more viciously than any needle. In that moment, Linda had felt not just abandoned but utterly invisible, as though the world had turned away while she lay fighting for her very existence. After the critical hours had passed and she finally opened her eyes to the dim light of dawn, relief flooded the room. The doctors celebrated quietly, the nurses smiled with weary eyes, and her family sobbed with gratitude that she had survived. But Linda herself felt none of their joy. She had come back from the brink, but she had not returned whole. Something essential had been left behind in the silence of the night, a part of her heart that she had begged for Quang to protect, but he had not been there to receive it. Days later, when she was strong enough to sit by the window and watch the sun filter through the curtains, Linda realized that survival was only the beginning of her journey. Everyone congratulated her for her courage, but they could not see the fracture beneath. To them, she was resilient, a woman blessed with a second chance. To herself, she was a fragile shell, carrying within her a secret grief that no words could ever fully explain. For while her body had endured the storm and was now slowly healing, the memory of facing her darkest hour without the man she loved haunted her like an echo she could not silence. Each breath she drew reminded her she was alive, but each beat of her heart whispered a cruel truth. In the most painful, defining moment of her life, she had been alone. And though Linda could pretend to move forward, though she could wear a brave smile for those around her, the emptiness left by Quang's absence was a wound that no time could close. Yet as Linda's body grew stronger, as color returned to her cheeks and her steps became steadier, a harsher truth began to surface, one that no one dared to say aloud in her presence. The complications from that night had left a permanent mark, not just on her memory, but on her future. The doctors, with their careful words and practiced sympathy, eventually revealed what Linda had already begun to sense in the hollow of her being: she could never bear children again. At first, the words floated above her as though they were meant for someone else. She stared at the doctor's lips moving, her mind refusing to absorb the meaning. Never again. The phrase rang inside her skull like a cruel bell. She had always carried a quiet dream of family, of little hands wrapped around her fingers, of laughter echoing through the house, of a future built on the simple, gentle joy of motherhood. That dream had been fragile but steady, something she believed time would one day bring her. And now, with a single diagnosis, it had been torn away forever. The nights were the hardest. When the house grew silent and the world outside retreated into darkness, Linda would sit by her bed with her knees drawn close, pressing a trembling hand against her stomach. She would imagine the child she had lost before it ever had the chance to breathe, the child whose presence she had once felt fluttering faintly within her. That invisible bond had been severed before it could fully blossom, and the emptiness it left behind was unbearable. Sometimes she closed her eyes and thought she could still feel the faint rhythm of a heartbeat that no longer existed, a ghostly reminder of what might have been. People around her tried to console her with words of comfort. "You survived, and that is what matters," they would say. "You are still young, and you can find joy in many other ways." But these phrases, well-meaning as they were, felt like paper bandages over a wound that bled endlessly inside her. Survival, to Linda, had become both a gift and a curse. She was grateful to breathe, to wake each morning to the light of day. But she could not ignore the truth that each day also reminded her of the loss carved deep into her identity. There were moments when she hated her own reflection. Standing before the mirror, she would study her face, paler than before, her eyes shadowed with sorrow, and feel like she was staring at a stranger. The woman who looked back at her was alive, yes, but she was also incomplete. The knowledge that she could never create life within her again weighed down every smile, every attempt at normalcy. Linda began to drift further into solitude, her pain too heavy to share. She would wander the garden alone, her footsteps slow along the stone paths, listening to the laughter of children playing in the distance. Each giggle carried through the air like an arrow piercing her chest. She wondered if she would ever find peace with the truth, or if this absence would follow her like a shadow until her final breath. But perhaps the cruelest part of all was not simply the loss itself, but the fear it planted inside her heart. If Quang returned, if he stood before her again, could she bear to tell him the truth? Could she risk watching his eyes change, his love falter, once he knew she could never give him the family they might have dreamed of together? It was a question that grew heavier with every passing day, turning her love into both a source of hope and of unbearable dread. Still, through the endless nights of grief and the long days of quiet endurance, Linda's heart clung stubbornly to a single thread of hope: Quang. His name lived in the silence of her prayers, his face lingered in the corners of her memory, and his voice echoed in the spaces between her breaths. She loved him, deeply and irrevocably, and despite the distance, despite the silence that stretched between them, she continued to wait. Yet beneath this love pulsed a fear so consuming that it threatened to unravel her completely. What if Quang's love could not survive the truth of her brokenness? Every day, as she folded away her sadness behind a mask of composure, Linda rehearsed the moment of his return in her mind. She imagined the sound of footsteps approaching, the door opening, his silhouette filling the frame. In those dreams, she would run to him, bury herself in his arms, and let the months of pain dissolve in his embrace. But as soon as the vision bloomed, it would fracture under the weight of her doubts. Would he still see her the same way when he learned she could never carry his child? Would he still reach for her, or would his hands fall away, his eyes dim with unspoken disappointment? The fear became a constant companion. It followed her into the simplest of tasks, when she prepared tea in the quiet of the morning, when she arranged the flowers by the window, when she brushed her hair in front of the mirror. With every reflection, she asked herself the same question: am I enough without the children we will never have? Her heart whispered that love should be stronger than circumstance, but her mind conjured the cruel possibilities of rejection, abandonment, and loneliness. Linda tried to find courage in small acts of faith. She wrote letters she never sent, pages filled with confessions and apologies, where she told Quang everything her lips could not yet speak. She folded them neatly and hid them in a box by her bedside, as if waiting for the right moment to reveal her deepest scars. She also found herself staring at the horizon each evening, as though the fading light might carry her longing across the distance to wherever he was. In those moments, her love for him was so fierce it nearly eclipsed her despair, but never entirely. The fear remained, quiet and merciless, whispering of what might happen when love collided with reality. Her family, sensing the heaviness within her, urged her not to worry. "If Quang truly loves you, nothing will change," they said gently. Yet Linda knew that love, however deep, was not immune to the weight of unfulfilled dreams. She had seen marriages fracture under far less. The thought of being the reason for Quang's disappointment, the reason for his unspoken sorrow, haunted her more than her own loss. For she could endure her pain, but could she endure being the source of his? And so, Linda waited. She lived each day in quiet suspense, balancing between hope and dread. If Quang returned, his choice would become her destiny. The way his eyes met hers, the words he chose, the silence he kept, each would decide not only the fate of their love but the shape of her future. She knew she could not delay the truth forever. When that moment came, she would have to place her fragile heart in his hands and trust that he would not let it shatter. Until then, she lingered in the fragile space between anticipation and fear, a woman torn between the desire to be loved as she was and the terror of being abandoned for what she could never give. And in that liminal space, Linda discovered the most painful truth of all, that waiting for love's answer could be even harder than surviving death itself.